All right, everybody, welcome. We are now at episode 10. My name is Eric Eisenhut of GK Icon Academies USA, and today's topic is fitness. And we have two fitness experts on our Goalkeeper Icon Pittsburgh staff that are going to be focusing on this topic today. We have Jesse Goleman and Bill Burtner. And for this episode, I'm going to let these guys take care of their introductions because I find it's beneficial to hear from them, not only their experience with this, but also their education. And I don't want to ruin it. So I'm going to let them take care of that if I could. So Coach Bill, can I start with you with a quick introduction, please?
Sure. Thanks, Eric. My name's Bill Burtner. In addition to my coaching responsibilities, my background comes from the field of exercise science. I have a master's degree in sports science. I'm also certified by the American College of Sports Medicine as an exercise physiologist. I've been training young athletes in the area of long-term athletic development / sports performance for over 25 years. And it's actually really good connection with the training, and also as it lends into the coaching. With the club that I work with, as you can imagine, I'm assigned a lot of the in-season conditioning, which is different from age group to age group, but very comfortable in my background with training young athletes.
Thank you, sir. Jesse, same thing, please. Can you introduce yourself, hook us up with your experience and background?
Absolutely. Hey guys, it's great to be here. So, like Eric said, my name's Jesse. I graduated with a business degree, but I've been training in the sports performance realm since about 2014 when I got my start at a franchise called Athletic Republic. That was back in New Jersey. Fast forward a few years later, I'm an ACE certified personal trainer. I'm also a precision nutrition certified coach, which is just obviously a nutrition coach based on sports performance, as well as a certified functional strength coach. A couple of my responsibilities other than coaching, when I was in my first coaching role at Centenary University in New Jersey, I was in charge of our off-season strength and conditioning program. And more recently, last summer, I started my own company called Goleline, where now I focus specifically on strength and conditioning for goalkeepers. And they're just a little bit different training philosophies that I try to cover at Goalline, just because it's focused solely on goalkeepers in our position.
Awesome. And we're going to deep dive into the differences between, by age, but also by position, because I think a lot of fitness that I see happening at the academy level or in clubs is an all-encompassing field player, and we don't worry about the upper body, quick twitch movements, things like that from a hand and from an upper body movement perspective from a goalkeeper. So I want to touch on that a little later on. But Coach Bill, I want to hear what you guys do at your club. When do you start introducing fitness? When do you start introducing weights? Is it all body movements, stretching? What exactly do you focus on at what age group within your club?
Well, it's dependent upon age. That's the big thing. It's the phases of development that applies to long-term athletic development. We start implementing fitness components with our academy. These are our U8, U9, U10 players. But that's going to consist mainly of change of direction movements, jumping, basically low-level plyometrics. At that age, if they're doing single leg jumps, and you try to format it with the younger kids, not in a formal training type of setting, but more in a game type of setting. A game as simple as capture the flag or tag provides a lot of long-term athletic developments. The ability to shadow somebody, to change directions, to cut, to plant that foot, to move in various directions. As far as strength goes at that young age, sure, we'll introduce some things, sit-ups, push-ups. Let's be real. At that age, their form's not going to be very good. But just to start introducing it at that age is a good idea because it's safe, and it's getting them to that next level. Now, when they develop to the next phase, which I call the developmental phase, this could be 11, 12, 13, you can begin to introduce more plyometric training. As far as plyometric training, what that is, it's more for power in the sense that jumping is considered plyometric. A lot of these training videos where you see people jumping up and down on boxes. That's plyometric. Jumping jacks technically are plyometric. But at that developmental phase, the plyometrics can go into more of what I would call like a split jump lunge. You can go deeper knee bends with their jumping. It's also, and this is a very important point to make, even though you have individuals at these age groups, there are still varying degrees of abilities within those age groups. So as my background as a trainer, you may have to take an individual and modify either through a progression or a regression based on their performance within that exercise. So if you start at age 12 or 11 and have them doing split jump lunges, you might see somebody who's unable or looks very awkward when they're attempting to do these. Either they can't control their upper body when they land. So as a trainer, you have to take that person and regress that movement so that they're maximizing it within that exercise. At the same time, you might have somebody, your top athlete who is able to do that without any problems. So you have to be able to progress that to give them a little more of a challenge. And when you're working with the goalkeepers, it's easier to do that because you're working with a smaller group. When you're implementing that type of training within a team atmosphere, you have to be very flexible and creative in how you make your regressions and progressions. Now, when we get up, puberty is a big point in development for our athletes. That's what I like to really introduce the introduction of weight training. And it doesn't have to be, Olympic weightlifting, power cleans, things of that nature. In fact, a lot of what we do with our older teams is we've implemented programs throughout the year through various facilities. But you have to include all components of fitness when you're working with the athletes. When looking at long-term athletic development, we want to focus on strength, overall body strength. We also want to focus on those high-intensity intervals. Interesting enough, last year we implemented a strengthening program for our older teams, which focused primarily on strength. But what we found is that they transitioned to the spring season, they weren't quite as in game shape as we'd like them to be. So if you're not involved with those high-intensity intervals and really playing the game, sometimes they can have conflicting benefits. As we increase our strength, that's always a good thing. But if you'll notice in a lot of sports, when do you do your strengthening routines? It's in the off season. The idea is that you want to build yourself up so that when you're entering the season, you're going to know that your body's going to break down as that season goes on. So you want to go into that season as strong as you can, knowing that there's going to be some atrophy and some breakdown and loss of strength based on the other demands of the event. A good case scenario is I worked with a guy in a different sport, baseball. He's a pitcher. He's in the Houston Astros farm system. He loses on average about 15 to 20 pounds of muscle during the season. So that off season is so important for him to build himself up, because during the season, all they have them basically doing are the reps, the throwing reps. So he's not allowing himself to maintain that strength through the weight training program. But as it goes back to soccer, the programs that we implement at our club, a lot of the stuff we do is during the winter, because that's kind of our off season, in between the spring and the fall season, in between the fall and the spring seasons. So what we want to do in the wintertime is we want to make sure that we're providing appropriate training methods based on where each of these athletes are within their long-term athletic development. As it relates to specific goalkeepers, if you want to, how about we come back to that? I can talk a little bit more about those specifics.
Cool. I appreciate that. That's Jesse, regarding everything Coach Bill just said, I'd like to get your perspective on that and start at the academy level. And as Coach Bill did, build yourself through or talk us through up to the development, puberty, and beyond, if you can, please.
Yeah, I think Bill touched on a lot of great points when you're talking about the 8 and 9-year-olds who are just beginning to play. And I think we need to focus more on just fun games that you played in gym class or at recess or whatever, maybe like the capture the flag, the tags, because that it requires a lot of running, a lot of change of direction, a lot of quick movements, and the kids love it. If you're in, trying to teach these 8 and 9-year-olds how to do a squat, how to do a push-up, you're going to lose them. And then they just can't do it in general either. So it's just like, let them have fun and play these different games and find different ways to incorporate change of direction, cutting, shadowing, sprinting, all in fun ways. Because at the end of the day, I think they just want to run around and have some fun. And that's what these games do. And it really challenges them too. And it's just it helps the brain coordinate your movements as well. And that's, I think, is a great function for all the kids to have as well. And then, like Bill's saying, as you get older, it's kind of just a case by case basis on how these kids are growing and maturing and going through puberty, because you might have a 12-year-old, you might have two 12-year-olds that one's up here and one's down here, right? It's just kind of like a case by case basis to where you need to understand what your progressions are, what your regressions are. For those athletes that are unable to perform a certain movement, can you take them down a notch? And again, we're not trying to build really great lifters, we're trying to build great athletes. And I think if we're focusing more on a strength basis, then we're not going to get the best athletic performance out of them. And so I think, and then as you get older in that 13, 14, 15 age, once these kids are starting to go through high school, then you could start to really focus on the way they move. Because especially as goalkeepers, for most of us, when we get, we're going to hit a growth spurt for the most part. So as we do that, our ankle mobility might start to drift a little bit, and our mobility in general, like our hamstrings, are going to start to get a little bit tighter. So I think we need to focus on being able to get these kids to move properly first before we can really start to build a strength foundation. Because if we're just going right into a strength, I think we're going to end up hurting these kids longer term than if we start slower and progress them step by step by step through their development years. Then that way they'll be able to get stronger, they'll be able to move better, and we can reduce the chance of injury.
Coach Jesse, when do you introduce weights? When do you introduce the different motions that Coach Bill was referring to earlier?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's all just on a case-by-case basis. I mean, ideally, you do it kind of right as they're going through puberty in that 13 to 14 range, right as they're entering high school. I mean, I'm a big believer in that, like, we need to understand how the body works. So I'd rather have the kids worry about, can they do a push-up properly before they can get under a bar, and I want to introduce them to like a bench presser, for example, or like barbell squat. I mean, they just squat their own body weight properly to a proper depth before we put a bar on their back. And so for me, if they can't do that, then I'm not going to throw them under some weight. So that's one of the things that I'm focusing on first. Ideally, they're able to, we can get them to do a couple push-ups and squat properly by, age 13 or 14 or even 12 for that matter, because right there, they're in the 7th and 8th grade range. And, you get to high school, you should be comfortable in a weight room. So, that 12 to 14 range for me.
Let's talk, Bill. I'm going to go back to you. Let's get right into what you were referring to towards the end there. You were talking about goalkeeper-specific training and how it varies or how it can vary. I'd love to hear your impressions with that, because that's something I strongly believe in. I feel that, upper body, quick twitch motion, especially with your hands. Like I always tell my kids, like when they're asking me for advice, like I'm no expert. I promise you I'm not. However, I know what helped me out. And, jumping rope, a lot of boxing movements, truthfully, whether it's a speed bag, whether it's hitting a heavy bag, those are all movements coming on, like, and you're kind of in your set too. So like, I always refer to that, and that's as limited as I am, right? But, what do you talk about when it comes to goalkeeper specific training, when it comes to this?
Well, looking at the overall athlete at young age, one of the best things that I encourage young players to do is to do multiple sports. Multiple sports will help develop a better athlete moving forward. And as it relates specifically to the goalkeeper, I have found that we get a lot of really good goalkeepers who come with martial arts backgrounds, going along what you're saying. One, mentally, there's a level of fearlessness with it, but they're balanced. The hand-eye coordination is really transferable when it comes to the martial arts. As they get older, you want to make sure you're looking at not only continuing along the path of long-term athletic development to make sure they're developing overall as an athlete, but now we get into what activities will be appropriate for them to apply when it comes to a sport-specific nature. Goalkeepers, you had mentioned jumping rope. Absolutely. That is going to help you to strengthen those springs in your legs, to be more explosive. Jumping rope is a low-level plyometric exercise that you can do anywhere, anytime. I encourage all my goalkeepers, jump rope. That's a fantastic exercise they can do on their own independently, plus provide them some cardiovascular conditioning. The other thing with goalkeepers as they get older, and even when they're young, is start to build that core. Having good core strength is tremendous in not only helping you improve your goal kicks and striking of the ball, but helping for recovery off the ground for second save scenarios. The stronger your core, the quicker you can get off the ground back up into that set position. So if we look at core strengthening in terms of long-term athletic development, starting with the younger kids, it's basically a simple progression with plank. Can they hold a proper push-up plank where the core is engaged? We have a nice straight line from the top of their head down to their tailbone. The hands are underneath the shoulders. If they can start progressions from there, that's where you build. And then from there, you can introduce a ball from a plank position. So you're tying in some components with the goalkeeper of touching the ball while also strengthening the core. And then whenever they get older, they get more developed, you can really challenge them with stuff that you would see, on YouTube with various core workouts. One of the tools I use a lot with our goalkeepers is I have a weighted ball. It's a weighted soccer ball. It probably weighs about 4 or 6 pounds, but just that ability to introduce goalkeeper related movements with that heavier ball, like doing something like a Russian twist, is a really good way to build core strength in our goalkeepers. The one component too that we have to bring into it, and this applies to all of our soccer players, is as they get older, as they get past puberty, and they begin, you see them building strength. What I also start to see is a lack of flexibility and mobility, which if that continues throughout that progression, you're going to give yourself a much higher chance of injury. So with goalkeepers and with the post-pubescent athletes, we want to make sure we're working some mobility training along with the strength and the sport-specific training and flexibility. If you look at it, I see it a lot with the hamstrings. Let's face it, our soccer players, to have some of these kids, 13 and 14, ask them to touch their toes, it's almost comical. They look like 90-year-old men. They can't bend. So for us to do our due diligence when we're working with those athletes, we have to be able to recognize where there is a lack of flexibility and mobility. Biomechanically, our body should function to where we have varying degrees of mobility and stability. Starting from the ground, we should have good ankle mobility, good knee stability, good hip mobility, good lower back stability, good thoracic mobility, and good cervical stability. When one of those kinetic chains is off, if we have tight ankles, that can create us a higher risk for a knee problem. Or if we have tight hips and hamstrings, that can do the same thing. It can put us at risk for a knee injury, or whenever you get old like me, you'll start to notice that the lower back starts to ache more. And that's mostly due to that limited mobility and of the hips or of the thoracic region. One way I point this out to kids is I talk about the periodization of fitness. And what that means is, for example, if you're training your strength, if you're getting stronger lifting weights, those gains that you make lifting weights, they will stay with you for 3-4 weeks before you start to see a fall off or an atrophy. If you look at aerobic conditioning, you're out running, you're playing games, that increased aerobic capacity will stay with you for about a week or so without any activity before you start to see a deconditioning phase. When it comes to flexibility and mobility, you are starting to see those muscles tighten up within 2 to 3 hours after your training. So it only makes sense that you should be doing some type of soft tissue work as you get older, that post-pubescent age, whether it be mobility work, flexibility, something like a yoga class, or what you see a big part of it now is everybody has their foam rollers and the rock balls to really work on soft tissue. That's an essential part of any athlete's workout routine, is that soft tissue work nowadays.
All right. Yeah, Coach Jesse, elaborate on that. Get more into, if you can, the goalkeeper specific training. What do you do with the upper body and the hand twitches and the hand motions? And also, after my next conversation point I want you to start is on nutrition. But let's start and continue with Coach Bill's, but talk more about from a goalkeeper specific movement area.
Right. I mean, again, but also going back to what Bill said, just being an athlete as a goalkeeper is going to be, I think, your best attribute. Just playing different sports growing up, they're all going to be able to translate to being a goalkeeper. And talking about your reaction and your hands, right? So I played basketball through high school, and I directly attribute that a lot of my basketball skills carried over to being a goalkeeper, whether it was just, my hand-eye coordination, my shuffling, or my, defensive slides. It's all translatable. So it's all, being that all-around athlete as a goalkeeper. But I mean, when we're talking goalkeeper specific fitness, I think we have to take a look at our position and really break down what we're doing. And being a goalkeeper, we're asked to perform these high intensity, quick movements, relatively infrequently in terms of a 90-minute match. There was a study where it was like, I think it was a third and fourth Italian division. Goalkeepers actually only made 92 high intensity movements throughout the game. And that's not 90 times, it's just 92 high intensity movements. So that's essentially one a minute. And that high intensity movement could have been a quick sprint, a back pedal, a shuffle, right? You're talking maybe like 7 times. But that's why it's so important that when we're called upon, our reaction speed has to be there. And when we're talking fast twitch upper body movements, a lot of what I like to focus on are what's called the eccentric portion of the lift, and that's just controlling the movement nice and slow. So, for example, if we're doing a push-up, something that I always focus on first is going down nice and slow. So let's say we're in the high push-up position, and we're going to take 5 seconds down. So we'll go 5, 4, 3, 2, and then on 1, you should be right above the ground. And then what we're going to do from there is try to explode up as fast as we can. And when we start doing that, then we're breaking down the muscle more, creating more tension in our muscle, building more muscle at that, but also just working on a fast concentric portion, meaning that we're activating those fast twitch muscle fibers a little bit more, working on that hand speed. But again, like you're mentioning, I think a lot of upper body strength is going to come from that slower eccentric portion of the lifts and exploding up. I see it a lot where kids or younger athletes are always in the weight room. Let's say for an easy example, they're doing a bench press and they're just like coming down, letting the bar slam across their chest, and just struggling. Their feet are coming off the ground as they're trying to lift the bar back up, and it's not doing anybody any good. So I think if we start focusing on controlling the weight by lowering it very slowly, anywhere from 4 to 5 seconds, and then trying to get the weight back up in less than a second, then we'll start to develop those fast twitch muscle fibers, giving us a little bit more of an upper body and even lower body, for that matter, explosive aspect to it.
What's your take on yoga? Bill mentioned that earlier. What's your take on yoga?
Yeah, I mean, I've never done it. I think it's good. I think any type of mobility type of work is good. I think Tai Chi is something that I would recommend. I've tried that once. I think that's really good just because it's a constant movement. It kind of incorporates a little bit of yoga, but it's not just static stretching. It's a lot of mobility involved too. So, I mean, any type of, and again, I think anything outside of the field that we can do to help our body, like a yoga, like a Pilates even. I know it's usually for all, middle-aged women, but I've seen a lot of NFL kickers actually head into the Pilates region. So it's something that I've actually try out myself just to see what it's like. But yeah, any type of like soft tissue work, yoga, Pilates, Tai Chi, I think that'll all help the mobility and the core strength of a goalkeeper.
Yeah, and I also, from a flexibility standpoint too, I've seen, to your point about other athletes doing it, other sports doing it. It seems to be more common now than it ever has, right? Just that those types of movements, yoga, stuff like that. So,
Yeah, I mean,
go
absolutely.
ahead. Sorry.
No, no, no. Bill, were you saying something?
No,
Oh, okay.
just the yoga being implemented in professional sports, the main reasoning behind that is reduction of injury. They're finding more and more studies that by doing yoga, by doing the foam rolling, it's really reducing the risk of injuries.
When do you start using those foam rollers with kids?
We introduced them at probably our U13 age group, so 12-year-olds. And one of the easiest ways we do it is with a tennis ball. There are some myofascial release techniques you can do with a tennis ball, putting them behind the calf and it's called a pin and stretch technique, where they're creating tension on the fascia and then articulating the joints of that area. And it's funny because you know right away if it's working because it hurts. I mean, the kids wince. Oh, that. Well, then you know you're doing it right. And whenever we bring in baseballs for our older boys too, or lacrosse balls, and just have them roll the sole of their feet, and the faces that they make doing that, and then they kind of realize, oh my goodness, how much tension your posterior chain, which starts at the middle of your foot, goes all the way up your legs and actually attaches to the base of your skull. So if you work on that insertion point in the middle of the feet, and you as soccer players especially, you get a ton of tension that builds up in the calves, in the ankles, that translates all the way up. So just by rolling the feet, it gives a tremendous benefit.
Yeah, Bill, I don't know your take on this, but just going back to the rolling out the feet, I think that a lot of people need to understand that our feet is almost what essentially controls our body, because when you think about it, when you walk, what's the first point of contact to the ground is what? Our feet. So when we wear shoes, we're kind of protecting our feet. But I don't know your take on barefoot training, but sometimes, like, especially when I'm squatting, I'll do it barefoot just so I can kind of feel the ground a little bit more. And I know in a team setting it's a little bit harder, but what's your take on that?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, in the gym, I have a lot of my young athletes when they start out doing lunges and squats in socks or in bare feet, because it's giving them better sensory information from the ground up.
Right.
And that goes along the lines of functional training. When we get these athletes in the gym, I try to make 90% of the activities functional, meaning they're not lying with back support or sitting. Everything that they can do, for example, a push-up is more functional than a bench press, because with a bench press, you're supported. Your feet are on the ground, your back is supported. Where in a push-up, you have to engage those core muscles. Same thing, a squat or a lunge is going to be more functional than a leg press where you're sitting down or laying on something. All those exercises are good at building strength, but we want to look at it from an athletic standpoint, in the standpoint that if you're playing a sport, there's no scenario in the game, hopefully, where you're laying on your back having to push somebody off you with your legs. So
right.
It doesn't make sense to train traditionally in the gym on machines. I'd rather work my young athletes in by introducing them to planks, push-ups, lunges, step-ups, where they have to control their entire body, head-to-toe connection, rather than getting them in and putting them on a chest press machine.
Mm. Eric, sorry, I'm going to say one more thing too about when you start training. My philosophy is just train unilaterally first, just focusing on one leg. And I know you were talking a lot about lunges, but I think just being able to control that, increase that proprioception on each leg and for the body. I think just training unilaterally is just always going to be your first step before anything.
Yep.
We have about 7 minutes left, but an important topic that I believe goes hand in hand with fitness is nutrition. And Jesse, I want to start with you. When do you start to get into diet and nutrition with your athletes?
Again, another case-by-case basis, right? You could have, unfortunately, the 12-year-old, 13-year-old overweight kid, or you could have the 12-year-old 60-pound kid. So it's all case-by-case basis. I wouldn't really focus strictly in strictly used loosely for me until you're like 16, 17, 18, just because I think like we just, they're kids. They're going to eat whatever they want. They're going to burn it off, whatever it may be. But, if they're overweight and they need to lose weight, then yes, do it. But we're talking at the high school to college level. Yeah. I mean, when I'm at the college level, I want to make sure my guys are getting proper nutrients. And a lot of times they're not. And it's unfortunate because I think they don't value it. Because even at the college level, you're going to, I played with a kid who just ate pizza and fries every meal, and he was an all conference center back. And, it doesn't catch up to you yet, but, long term it will. But I think it's something that these kids at least need to know about. And I'm sure we've all have seen those kids that I just mentioned that can just eat whatever and perform at a high level. But for those kids that maybe aren't performing as well, I think it's something we can introduce. And I think you can introduce it at any age, but more than likely, I don't think they're going to follow it. But if they at least have that knowledge, that background knowledge of what to do and when to eat what and why we're eating this, I think it'll just help them as they grow. But it's tough because nutrition is such a hard subject. And I think especially with kids, it's tough to get them to eat properly, consistently, at least.
Coach Bill, I'll continue with nutrition as well as hydration.
Yeah, I agree. High school age is when we really start to introduce recommendations for nutrition. With our girls teams, and actually having 2 high school daughters that both play soccer, I am always stressing the importance of eating for performance. Sometimes it's one of those scenarios where you have to live and learn. And I've seen it. I've seen girls on the sideline because they're not eating properly before competition get lightheaded and they just can't perform. There are some critical times whenever you want to make sure you eat. One thing we start pushing with our older teams is immediately after your workout. You want to try, that's a critical metabolic growth point to where you've just exhausted all your glycogen stores. Your body at that point is looking for something. So to have something right after the workout, and a lot of studies have been around chocolate milk as an ideal ratio of protein and a high glycemic carbohydrate, which gets that glycogen back into the muscles quickly to help those muscles, maintain their energy levels, but also help them to get stronger. And most kids I know like chocolate milk, so that's an easy one. But when you get into more specific details with nutrition, you can be more creative based on a case-to-case scenario. With hydration, it's around the principle that you want to make sure you're hydrating before, during, and after. When you get up to the collegiate levels, in a lot of sports, the time where you're training and losing a lot of fluids during a training session, they're weighing you. For example, I used to train a kid who is a Division I hockey goalkeeper. He will lose on a typical training session, hard training session, 8 to 10 pounds of water weight. So before sessions, they're weighing him. Their trainers there weigh him before training session, weigh him afterwards, and they actually know how much fluid they need to replace back into him based on how much he's lost. So that's you probably won't get that degree within a soccer training, but the basic recommendations would to be make sure you're drinking before, during, and after.
Cool. Fair enough. All right, final words, Coach Jess. I'm going to start with you. What would you want to leave everybody with today?
Final word, I'll leave the final words touching on the nutrition and going back to supplements, because I know that's a big topic. And I just want to recommend anybody under the age of really like 16 not to touch a supplement, just because you can get everything nutritionally in food. So just please be careful. You don't need the extra protein supplement. Just try to find a way to get it in food first, until you're at least 18. Once you're 18, college, still try to get all your nutrition needs through food before really focusing on a supplement. And if you do choose to buy a supplement, talk to a trainer, talk to somebody first, and educate yourself on the supplement and why you're doing it. But so those are my final words. Thank you for letting me be here and share some of my knowledge. It was a lot of fun.
Cool. Coach Bill, final words.
Yeah, we'll talk about it just from a training aspect, breaking it down into different ages of development. When they're young, let play be the development. Let them play games. Let them have fun. And then as they get up to that developmental stage past puberty, that's when you really want to start hammering home a training program that makes sense for the season that they're in. A lot of our soccer seasons now, I know at the club level, they're transitioning right out of high school, very little downtime, then they go right into the club season. So technically they're playing almost 10 months out of the year, which is crazy. So to be able to build in an appropriate training regimen during that time becomes a challenge. But as the coach and as a trainer, you have to make sure that they're doing that. Winter time is usually a big opportunity. I know sometimes it conflicts with a lot of the college showcases that our older teams are going to, but you have to do your due diligence as a coaching staff to make sure that these kids are learning how to train properly off the field with weights and preaching that recovery with the soft tissue work and the proper nutrition. That all has to start being ingrained, because if they do go on to play in college, it's essential. Talking to my college coaching friends, that is one of the biggest challenges, especially on the women's side, is getting them to eat properly for performance.
Awesome. I love it. Thank you, guys. My final words, and based on my experience with fitness and my limited knowledge, based on just my own due diligence, what I grew up doing. I say this to the coach: you can control as a player two things. You can control your training attitude, and you can control your fitness. Everything else is someone else has an influence on your playing time, when you have to get up for practice, when the game is, all those other variables have influence on others. You control those two things. And I get more upset with players that don't come in fit than I do with some, that drives me nuts. That's just a personal decision. That's a personal lifestyle choice that you're making. And it is a lifestyle, nutrition and working out and the speed and strength component to get yourself properly prepared for that season is essential. And I feel people sometimes will go into preseason or go into their seasons unfit and use those couple of weeks to get themselves fit. Well, you know what? That's when injuries happen. And I see it all the time. And it's frustrating from a coach's perspective. So please pay attention to your fitness and nutrition all. Guys, thank you. You guys were wonderful. Appreciate it as always. It's awesome having you here because I don't know much about it. I always push people to you too. So you're my experts in this. So again, thank you. I rely on you a lot. Everybody tune in for our next episode. Thank you for joining us today. Have a great day. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.